Hello, I'm Richard Ruedin. Thank you for showing up today. I'm from Express Scripts, and today we're going to go through automated PCF upgrades using Concourse. Little agenda here. We're going to start how our journey began with the challenge presented to me to how we are now currently measuring success. And hopefully by the end we'll have enough time for any questions you might have. So the challenge. My boss at the time came up to me and he said, man, I'm just tired of being behind on all of our patching. Whenever I would ask you about a new feature, you would always give me the excuse of, oh yeah, we'll just install that on the next release. So he came to me and he said, well, within 30 days of a minor release, all of our environments need to be updated to that version. I said, oh, that should be easy. We'll just hire some more people. We'll dedicate some of the people that we have now, not me, of course, and all they would do would be updating PCF. Well, he really didn't like that answer. I really can't put it on the slide of what he said, but I translated it for everybody to say all environments must be upgraded with little to no human intervention. So now we have the problem. How are we going to automate this and meet that goal of 30 days? And why is this difficult? This is difficult because Pivotal is always releasing something new, whatever it's a bug fix or new release of a new feature or whatever. Pivotal is always releasing something. So I did a little research here. In the past 30 days, we had 2 updates to OpsMan, 5 updates to Elastic Runtime, and 2 updates to RabbitMQ, which that's only just 3 products. And for us personally, I know we have probably about 5 or 6 other products installed. So, but for the sake of this example, let's say we have 5 environments, these 3 products, now we have 45 updates to install, and that's just for 30 days. So there's no way that someone can just sit there manually update and always keep up to date. So how do we start? I guess a quick poll in the room. Who's used Concourse before or have installed it? Raise your hands. That's good mixture. So how do you get a Concourse instance? There's several ways. You can BOSH deploy it. You can create some VMs and install Concourse on there and have it ready to go that way. Or there's the new Pivotal tile that has Concourse already installed that you can deploy. But regardless, how you have it deployed, you need to have access to the PCF API endpoint and the Ops Manager URL. And those are the 2 main things that Concourse has got to need to be able to interact with your environment to do any of these upgrades. Another nice thing that I didn't put up there is access to the internet. It's not something guaranteed that you need to have, but it will make your life a whole lot easier if you actually have access to the internet from your Concourse instance. So the next thing is the PCF Pipelines GitHub repo. I know some of the previous talks this week have gone over this, and I'll go over it again here in a second. But you're going to need to at least have a clone of that repo to be able to push up the pipelines. And finally, you'll need the Fly CLI. And what that is the command line interface that you need to be able to interact with Concourse, to be able to fly up the pipelines and check the status of Concourse, of its workers, and things like that. I would suggest that you have that CLI installed on the same machine as you have cloned your GitHub repo. It makes your life a whole lot easier. So what is PCF Pipelines? It's a great starting point for installing and upgrading Pivotal Cloud Foundry. You can do the things that are listed up here. You can not only upgrade your product tiles, but you can upgrade build packs, your ops manager, but you can also install PCF from scratch using these pipelines. And the best thing you can see here as well is that it supports any IaaS solution that you have that Pivotal supports. So if you're in the public cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP, you're all set, ready to go. If you're on site using vSphere or OpenStack, you're covered there as well. We personally have vSphere and have been using the pipelines for close to a year now, and we've had little to no issues with it. One thing that you are going to need with the PCF pipelines, not only to clone this repo, but you're also going to need your environment variables because you're going to need the information customized for your environment, like IP addresses and network names and DNS names and all that, to be stored and to be pushed up at the same time when you push up these pipelines. So the list of information that you're going to need, there's a template inside the repo, and depending on what product you're trying to upgrade, like Opsman, it will give you all the information that you're going to need to discover and be able to put into that file whenever you do your upgrade. So you got your first pipeline updated, and you're actually updating a product, and you're done, right? Well, actually, there's some things that you might want to think of before you call it quits on this journey. One thing is you might want to integrate with your ticket change management system. So you can actually have a source of record saying that you did make a change on a certain day to this product. It will make your auditors happy. They have something to look at now after you did your change. It could have been something that you manually were doing beforehand. Now it would probably be a good thing to integrate into your pipeline to be able to do that task. Another thing would be notifications. Not only notifying your community saying that, hey, we're doing an upgrade, or this is when it finished, but your own team saying, hey, I'm making this change, be aware of any errors or anything like that. It's come up with that. The errors like, hey, the upgrade failed, or things like that, you could put notifications in for that to be able to notify your team to take a look if something went wrong during the upgrade. And lastly, with the toggling alerts on and off is a good thing too. It's something that we always had trouble with doing that manually because we would always kick off an upgrade, not think about it, and then 10, 15 minutes later, our on-call person decided to get all these alerts, and then they got pretty angry about that. So we decided to put that inside of our pipeline as well. And before I talk about multi-foundation support, to do these integrations, Concourse has a concept of resources, and these resources could be things for notifications like email or Jira or HipChat, things like that, that are already pre-made and ready for you to use to integrate into your pipeline. And you can see at the Concourse's site, at the resource types URL, you can see a full list of those. And some of them are built in that Concourse supports, or others are third party that are community supported. But if there's not something already pre-made for you to use already, you can use the generic HTTP API resource. I suggest using that instead of creating your own custom resource to be able to connect to a system that they don't already have a pre-built resource for. We use it for connecting into Grafana, and all it does is we connect to the REST endpoint, give it a call, and then it will do the actions like a regular REST command. Going back to the multi-foundation support, these pipelines are a good start for just a single foundation. You'll be able to upgrade one foundation, but then you have the problem of how do you support all your other environments using these PCF pipelines. For us personally, we have a total of 9 environments. So we had to solve the problem of how do we make sure that the product that we installed in our sandbox test environment is the same product and tested all the way through our production environment. So for us, we had to solve the multi-foundation support with downloading the product and putting that in a local S3 bucket, and now that PCF pipeline triggers off of that instead of going out to PIBNet every time. And once it goes through the whole upload stage, download stem cell, apply changes workflow, it then moves that update product all the way to the next foundation. This way, we are for sure getting the right file and the right update going from one foundation to the next, all the way down to our production system. But before we do that, how do we make sure that we have, tested thoroughly, that we didn't break anything? Even though the pipeline might say all the way green and it should go to the next foundation, how can we validate that? So this is kind of what we do with Concourse and how we validate This is a sample pipeline for our environment that tests one PCF foundation. And let me go through a summary of what all this is. The first step is that it will clean up any of the artifacts beforehand since the previous run. And when I say that, this pipeline runs continuously. Every half hour, this kicks off and runs all these tests. So the first step is to do a cleanup and make sure that there's anything that was left over from the previous run that we remove that. This next step here is creating the infrastructure. So we create a spot for all these tests to run, building an org and space, things like that. And that way we have a spot for these next deployment applications to be able to run and be able to actually do the smoke tests here in the last column. So what are we actually testing at this point? The big thing is creating our build environment. It does all the operator stuff that you might not do every day. So we create an org and space. We create services from the marketplace. We assign application security groups. We create users. All things that we want to make sure that are working as an operator. And whenever we do an upgrade, or even if it's just throughout the day, we just want to make sure that functionality is still working. And then once that environment is created, we deploy our applications, like I said before. And those applications are custom for us. What we did is we picked out the use of our commonly used build packs. So we had Java and Ruby and Node.js, for example, and we created these applications to be able not only to test deploying an application, but also test the common languages that our company uses. So if there's an issue with a build pack or a new upgrade that could potentially break something, we were testing, making sure that we're deploying those applications. And then we actually bind those marketplace services that we created in the previous step to not only see that we're binding those services, that can actually happen, but in the next step, our actual smoke tests are exercising those services that we present out to our community. So like MySQL, we have an app that's bound to that. It creates a table, reads, writes data, it deletes data, things like that. So not only do we know that MySQL is up and running, but it's actually functioning. Same thing with Spring Cloud Services. We have a Java app that connects to SCS config server. We not only are testing that we have the config able to be read from Git, but we also are testing to make sure that it can actually refresh that data, things like that, if we make any changes inside that Spring Cloud config server. And same thing with Redis. Caching random values, we're reading those results, deleting values. We just want to make sure that the functionality is there and we're not being surprised if after an upgrade that something broke. So not only are we testing the marketplace services, but we're also testing the actual fundamental foundation things like the fire hose. So we create a nozzle, we create a UAA user that connects to that nozzle, and then we're looking for messages that we know should be there. And if not, then we alert on that and we have somebody actually check that out to see what's going on. And lastly, the custom SSL certificates. What that is that we have an internal cert chain that we deploy on all of our Bosch VMs, and we want to make sure that if we deploy an application, that we can actually create and terminate that to an endpoint internally to make sure that that communication is properly set up. So what I really want to get out of all of this, and the main reason why you want to test, is that for us, this has caught so many things. Things like I said, with an upgraded build pack, it broke our tests because they removed a version of Ruby that we were running. So we were catching these things before we were getting service desk tickets, things like that our community said, hey, your foundation's broken, did you make any change? And of course, the default answer is no, we didn't change anything. So, but now we actually have that, those tests and the the results that we expect, and if that breaks, we were now communicating that out to our community to just say, hey, look, there's something that you want to look out for if you're using this version. That way they have the awareness. Another example of this was we upgraded MySQL, and that had a new feature, breaking feature in there that broke our smoke test for locking tables. Now we saw the behavior of that, and we were able to communicate that out to our developers to say, if you have this issue, take a look. It could be due to this new feature. So if you're not doing this already, I would highly suggest, whether it's making your own custom tests or even just running the errands inside of Opsman for the services that you have, just run those regularly. That way you know you have results and everything like that that are common, and if you see any anomalies that you can act upon that depending on what you just did. Could have upgraded ERT and now XYZ errand doesn't work anymore. Let's take a look at that before we promote this up. So what are we doing now? How are we measuring success after we got all this validation in there, all of our pipelines deployed out? We're now upgrading all the way up to production. Before our automated upgrades, it would take at least 45 business days to get through 9 environments that we had for just one patch. And then to get to a new minor version, let's say for ERT 1.9 to 1.10, it would take 3 to 4 months to get to that new minor version. And the main reason for that is due to we didn't like to upgrade. We would always run into issues. We would say, hey, we're going to stick at this level of ERT, and then when we have to, because of a new feature, we would actually upgrade to the next version. So that left many patches that we missed, and we would go directly to that version, which caused a lot of issues. It wasn't that, I guess, method is not really being able to be tested through Pivotal. So if we were to go from 1.8.7 to 1.8.16, we missed all those patches afterwards. And we would always have to call Pivotal, or we would have to open up a service desk ticket with them, and then we would have to solve why that patch failed during that upgrade process. So now, we don't have to worry about that. We're hitting every patch right through our sandbox environment. Anything new that comes out, we download it, and it runs all the way through. And we're constantly doing that validation testing to where we now know that there's not a patch or a bug from jumping a major version. The other benefit too is that since we're always up to date, if we have to go to that next minor version of ERT, so let's say we're at 1.11 and we want to go to 1.12, we don't have to worry about trying to look at the compatibility matrix and say, well, we have this version of Redis installed and this version of MySQL. We need to jump to this before we go to the next version of ERT. There's not that guessing game anymore. We can take a look at the compatibility matrix, but 9 times out of 10, we're already up to the right version to be able to go to that next version of ERT. So that's been beneficial for us. And as you can see, one patch and one product will take around 5 business days to go through all 9 environments compared to the 45 days. And now we are successfully meeting our goal of 30 days for a new minor version. So that's awesome for us. Let's see. We have some references that I wanted to go through before we reach any questions and answers session for this. There's the PCF pipelines you can go to track those pipelines and everything. There's concourse and the list of concourse resource types. And of course, there's my blog that I'm shamelessly plugging. So you can actually go there. There's more articles about maybe how to install concourse or how to use Ansible and in conjunction with PCF. Things like that should be helpful for you. So that would be a good place to go to. And that's all I have for right that. Do you have any questions for me? I can answer real quick. So the ones that were blue, that were on the picture, or so those were there for the organ space. I guess I still couldn't hear you. Sorry.
Basically saying are those the smoke tests, are those custom apps that you guys built, or did you get them?
Yes, we actually custom built those.
Question so we can hear back there.
Sure. The question was, is that are those custom apps that we built, or did we get them somewhere else? Yes, we did build those. They're really generic tests and apps that we created or had help getting created based off the different build packs like Ruby and Java and things like that. And then we would have a custom endpoint that would actually run the tests and provide those results inside of Concourse to be able to give a green or a red response and then eventually notify us to say that there's something going on with that. Go ahead.
Two-part question. Are you operating online where you're getting the PCF pipelines from actually GitHub.com? And are you tracking with the current version of the pipelines and dealing with any upgrade issues from the pipelines themselves?
So the first part of the question is, are we getting these pipelines directly from GitHub, or do we kind of have a fork of our own? I want to say that yes, we have a fork of our own. We kind of had this really early on in the game before it was released. And due to some of these customizations that I said, the pipelines themselves don't give you that ability to do like notifications and things like that. So we had to go off on our own beaten path to be able to use the pipelines. To follow up on your second, how do we, I guess, track those changes if there's any changes to the pipelines themselves? How do we account for that? So for us, what we do is if there's a new functionality, like let's say there's a new step for instead of stage, there's XYZ new process to be able to run. We take a look at what's current, so it's more manual than trying to pull down the new, and then try to retrofit that with all the customizations that we made. So the basic functionality hasn't changed. We're still uploading, we're still staging, we're still downloading stem cells, and we're still applying changes. So if there's a new product that comes out and it doesn't follow that maybe logic to stage that tile, then we kind of make our changes and to see what they're currently doing, and then we pull that into our pipelines and then go from there. So, go ahead.
You mentioned the first step was a bit of a cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
What things are you doing there? Is that flushing out all the stem cells?
So the question was, with the cleanup, what are some of the steps that we're doing there? So what we're doing is cleaning up some of the services we created before on the previous run. We're deleting the organ space. We're deleting the users that were created. We're deleting the application security group. Pretty much bringing it back to a point where it looks like we never ran these tests before. So, go ahead. So the question was, is there a reason why we're doing that at the beginning instead of the end? We're doing this at the beginning just in case if we did have failures. For these smoke tests, we didn't want to clean up those artifacts and not be able to see any type of history of maybe there's error messages inside the application logs itself, and to be able to take a look at that. Granted, we only have a 30-minute window, but we'll hit that notification and we'll at least have some time to do some investigation, or if we can pause that cleanup step and do even more deeper analysis if there is a major breaking change that we couldn't figure out in that 30-minute time period. Go ahead.
You mentioned that having concourse access to internet is a great thing, but do you have any pipelines that work only with internal available resources?
So the question was, do we have any concourse pipelines that are only dealing with internal resources instead of going out to the internet? So yes, we do. So we have a main pipeline that will download all of our PibNet resources based on our search criteria. So we only want to get, let's say, ERT 111 and things like that, and only look for that. Then we move that, that update file and move it to an internal S3 bucket. And then that's what we trigger our pipelines off of. So we're not constantly looking out to the internet every 30 minutes. We just want to get that artifact file, lock it in, put it internally, and then trigger all of our pipelines off of that. And what we're doing, we're using Minio as our S3 provider. Some of the other pieces of our resources or the things that we're pulling in, we're storing on Artifactory instead of going directly out to get the latest version. We have a version that's customized for our environment, and then we just pull that from there.
Was it lots of effort to make pipeline work with internal resources?
So the question was it a lot of effort to make it work with internal compared to external resources? Not too much. I would say if you're just blanketly using the one PCF pipelines, that would be great. But using internal resources is really just changing endpoints and maybe changing some of the access usernames and passwords that you go out to there. Maybe it's using an SSH key compared to actual username and password going to an endpoint. The question is, are we using the OHM tool? Yes, we are. We're using that for all of our Ops Manager integration for uploading stem cells, downloading diagnostics reports, things like that. Go ahead. The question was, are we using the concourse tile or have we taken a look at it? Currently, no. How we deploy it out is using a BOSH release. So we keep up to date with another pipeline to be able to update those BOSH releases to make sure that our concourse version is good. Right now, that screenshot shows we're at 3.5, and I know they're at 3.7, so we got a little bit more to do. But no, we haven't taken a look at the tile yet for us. We want to have at least one concourse to rule them all type of thing. So if we deploy that into the foundation, it might not have access to all the other foundations in that environment. So we deploy it outside of the foundation to be able to connect back into those environments. Go ahead.
Do you retain the output results from smoke tests ongoing, or those throw away from upgrades?
So the question was, how long or do we keep the actual results of these tests? We don't keep a long list. I think we keep at least about 30 days, I believe. I'm trying to think. There's a trigger inside Concourse to say how many logs you want to retrieve within a certain amount of time. I don't remember that off the top of my head, but there is a period of time that we do where we can go back inside of Concourse to take a look at that. As for keeping it long-term, for us, it's not too much of a benefit just because that it's always evolving. We might hit 5 updates like for ERT within the past 30 days. So does it really matter if we check the errors back from an ERT version 3 versions ago type of thing? So, but we do have the history there stored inside of Concourse if we need to go back and take a look. Go ahead. Sorry, I couldn't hear. How often do we test is the question. So we do this every half hour to every environment that we have. That way we're constantly making sure that we're available for our customers to use and testing these basic functionalities for not only an operator, but also for our customers, our developers, to be able to simulate pushing an app and binding a service and things like that. So the question is, do we keep these smoke tests running during our upgrades? And do we ever pause them? So I guess I would say yes for both of those. So yes, we do run them throughout our upgrade just to make sure that we are up and we're not breaking into components during an upgrade. But we do pause things like you can see here, we have two tiles that are paused. One reason was the deploy BOSH for Windows. We don't have that for every foundation, but that is still a test that we want to run on the foundations that do have it. So we just pause it for the ones that don't have it. Or if we're doing maintenance or if there's a larger issue, we take a look and then we pause that and then fix that issue before we constantly get that failure every half hour. Hey, we already know what's going on, so we don't need to be reminded of it, type of thing. There we go. What? The key resource types is the question. Are you talking about resources inside of Concourse? Like I mentioned in the talk, the generic HTTP API one is good because there's not enough, I guess, specific resources for every application that we have or every system that we want to integrate with. So that's a good, handy one to take a look at. We also use the Git one a lot, so for where we store our internal pipelines through our internal Git. So we're pulling those successfully every time that we go ahead and run our pipelines. And the time resource is always good, so for scheduling all of our pipelines. And then this version tag is also good. It's a resource that will increment versions for our next trigger point. So we not only run it every half hour, but we have a version tag that will go, and then that is what's triggering the other steps in the pipeline off of that new version. Go ahead. So the question is, how are we running our upgrades through all of our environments? So to answer yes, we do have a sandbox environment first that it automatically runs all the way through. And then we have our stepping down to our other environments that can run in parallel. Let's say we have our DR environments that we already tested and it's going through there parallel. But we make sure that for our big environments like our non-prod for all of our developers to use, and for production that we kind of take that more offline and do a more serial approach for that. The next one would be using an S3 bucket would be doing the triggers. So I'm getting the hook, so so I'm available here if you want to ask any more questions, and thank you for attending.